Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something really fascinating, the actual, on-the-ground realities of modern, high-stakes problem solving. You know, when we think about innovation, it's super easy to just picture a scientist in a lab looking through a microscope, or an engineer sketching out blueprints. But taking those massive technical breakthroughs and actually applying them to our society? Wow, that requires navigating a wildly complex web of laws, funding, and real human impact. It's this incredibly dynamic process of taking raw, theoretical potential and turning it into tangible progress for everyday people.
So, let's play a little game. Think about huge suspension bridges, artificial intelligence, complex cybersecurity networks, and your local clean water grids. What do they all have in common? It's really tempting to just lump them together and say, well, they're all purely engineering or scientific hurdles, right? But if we just view them as technical puzzles, we completely miss the big picture of how these systems interact with actual people. We miss the real-world challenges like, how do we provide equitable access to that clean water? Or how do we make absolutely sure a newly deployed AI algorithm doesn't silently perpetuate historical biases?
Actually, here's the reality we need to internalize today. They are massive, highly complex public policy challenges. A brilliant blueprint for a high-speed railway or a flawless piece of code for a new medical device. They don't just magically deploy themselves into society. Moving from a theoretical breakthrough to a reality that actually helps communities requires navigating incredibly intricate systems of laws, messy politics, and massive financial allocations. So while the science is the foundation for sure, the implementation is a completely different beast entirely.
Now you might be wondering, what exactly is that implementation mechanism? Well, public policy is way more than just some abstract, boring government bureaucracy. It is a living, active system of laws, regulatory measures, and funding priorities that dictates exactly how a society functions and spends its resources. Think of it as the ultimate vehicle for taking raw technical knowledge and transforming it into real public outcomes. Without this system, a scientific discovery is just isolated information, but with it, that knowledge becomes a structured tool for widespread, meaningful change.
And that brings us to this really unique intersection. STEM public policy sits right exactly where hard technical expertise crashes into public decision-making. Navigating the space means you're dealing with some seriously tricky regulations and fiercely debated funding priorities. And honestly, this is exactly where the stakes get incredibly high, because how we navigate these financial and regulatory hurdles directly impacts our biggest modern challenges. Stuff like ensuring equitable access to healthcare, fixing our local education systems, and driving broader racial and gender equity across society.
Let's look at infrastructure to see how this plays out in the real world. On the engineering side, building a road is all about materials science and physics. You lay the asphalt, you build the road. But the policy side, that is where the human impact is determined. Historically, if we just plan infrastructure without strong ethical policy, we've literally seen it divide marginalized communities or cut off their access to vital resources. So making sure a new transportation network actually promotes racial and economic equity, rather than just reinforcing historical divides, is 100% a matter of strategic public policy.
Upgrading our clean water and power grids is another totally monumental task. The science behind modernizing these grids is super complex. It involves advanced materials and energy distribution mechanics. But the success of the whole shebang? That relies entirely on long-term planning dictated by public policy. Modernizing a grid means you have to get specific legislative action to secure massive government funding. It means navigating complex local zoning laws just to ensure those critical upgrades actually reach the communities that are most vulnerable to environmental shifts.
Or consider how this dynamic applies to cybersecurity. Protecting vulnerable places, like your local hospital or your kids' schools, from devastating digital attacks absolutely takes serious, hardcore coding skills. But listen, code alone isn't a strategy. When policy fails to step up, mandate proper cyber defenses, and establish strict security standards, who pays the price? It's real patients relying on medical equipment and real students losing access to their educational platforms. Technology provides the shield, but the legislative frameworks dictate exactly where and how it's deployed.
Oh, and artificial intelligence is another perfect example of this. AI algorithms have the power to completely revolutionize how we deliver public services, right? They're a total game changer. But, and this is absolutely crucial, without proactive policy, an unchecked algorithm can so easily automate discrimination, especially concerning racial and gender equity in major areas like hiring, lending, or criminal justice. Crafting regulations that demand transparency, that root out inherent data bias, and that protect individual privacy is what makes AI a tool for progress rather than just a mechanism for disparity.
I really want us to take a second to absorb this next thought. Science finds answers, but policy ensures ethical implementation. I mean, that hits the nail on the head, right? This applies across the board, but especially when we look at modern healthcare challenges. Biomedical science might engineer an absolute miracle cure or a revolutionary public health initiative, but honestly, that scientific breakthrough means absolutely nothing if regulatory measures and insurance laws make it completely unaffordable or inaccessible for the average person. It is the steady hand of policy that ensures the answers actually reach the public.
So connecting that cold hard evidence to decisive action isn't just some abstract idea. It is driven by incredibly dedicated professionals working across multiple sectors. And this is where the amazing career paths come in. This vital work is done by folks inside government agencies drafting essential regulations. It's driven by politicians passing critical funding laws, passionate advocates in the nonprofit sector fighting for equity, and compliance officers in the private sector ensuring new technologies are actually deployed responsibly.
Which leads us to the ultimate question. The tools to shape our future aren't just sitting in a lab somewhere, they are out there in the public arena. That raw technical knowledge desperately needs to be translated into policy if we are truly going to solve our biggest global challenges. So what about you? How will you use your expertise? Will you shape the future from inside a government agency, as a fierce advocate in a nonprofit, or by leading compliance in the private sector? The intersection of STEM and policy is waiting for your contribution.